Greetings, comrades, and welcome to an Enlisted review I've decided to throw together for you guys. As I've mentioned, a big priority in order for me to get more gaming content out there is to talk about the types of games I'm playing in my free time and use that as a springboard to make new types of content. And that's exactly what I'm going to do for you guys today. So in case you've noticed, on occasion, YouTube channels will like to shout out various games and products. And I find myself a lot of the times thinking, how good can those products actually be? If someone wasn't being paid to advertise them, would they still be worth considering? And one of those games in particular that has caught my attention has been Enlisted. As many of you know, who have been following this channel for quite some time, I'm a huge World War II history nerd, among other types of history and war nerd, and love wargaming of all types. I myself have been looking for a good World War II shooter to fill a certain void in my heart, and then a game called Enlisted started getting sponsorships on some of the YouTube channels that I follow, and I got interested because it seemed like a game that would be right up my alley. The thing which interested me the most, actually, was one of the things that seems to turn most people off of this game, which is the idea that you command a squad of bots, which you then control and give commands to. Given bots a dubious history, shall we say, in other FPS games, I understand people's reservations, but you guys know me. I love swarms of things, and the thought of sending AI swarms of men to their doom gives me all sorts of warm, fuzzy feelings. So I thought I'd give the game a shot and see what it had to offer. So over the last week or so, I've been giving this game a pretty sizable chunk of my free time. And now I believe I can actually offer some coherent thoughts and opinions for you guys. So before we begin this video, let me say, this is not brought to you by the developers of the game itself. This is brought to you by the opinions inside my brain. So I think I'll begin with a lot of people's first reservation about the game, including my own, which is that it's free to play. I personally, being somewhat of an older school gamer, generally do not like free to play games and have a bias against them. The free to play label often conjures up images of shitty mobile clones and credit card theft machines disguised as games. I want to have a good, complete product which I pay a reasonable price for. And to be quite honest, I have a very limited experience with free-to-play games before this. For example, I was one of the people who stopped playing Overwatch once it became a free-to-play game, rather than a complete product which I paid for at one point. So it's obvious that I associate the free-to-play label with a step backwards. So the first question on my mind when checking out this game was, how exactly are you going to extract money from me? What's your game plan here? Am I going to feel burned? Am I going to feel exploited? Because, like many of you, I don't inherently hate the thought of free-to-play games. It's just the grindy and exploitative nature that has come to be associated with so many of them. So does Enlisted escape this crap? Well, I can report that it has done quite a bit to wash some of that bitter aftertaste in my mouth when it comes to free-to-play games. However, it has not been able to erase it entirely. For one, I would describe the free-to-play system in Enlisted as not necessarily exploitative, but certainly grindy. Jumping into the game, you get to choose one of the various campaigns, and quite honestly, this is a high point for Enlisted, which has a variety of maps and campaigns to choose from. And again, as someone who is a nerd for the era, I enjoyed the wide variety of countries and weapons and places that were available to play. This was definitely a highlight for me. The main campaigns available are the Battle of Moscow, the D-Day invasion of Normandy, the Battle of Stalingrad, the Battle for Tunisia, which does feature Italian soldiers and vehicles, which is a big plus in my opinion, the Battle for Berlin, and lastly, the Pacific Theater. What is also cool is that while there might be 3 theaters on the Eastern Front, they all represent various different times and campaigns during the war, and their squads reflect that. So it varies quite a bit. For example, during the Battle for Moscow, the Red Army has access to pretty basic equipment, whereas during the Battle for Berlin, that same Red Army now is at the point of bringing some of its mightiest equipment to bear against the German Reich. So you may think that I jumped into one of these Eastern campaigns. However, you would be wrong, dear comrades, as one of the selling points which finally got me to try this game in the first place was its Pacific campaign, as I had been hankering for a World War II shooter set in the Pacific Theater. So I jumped into a campaign with the Imperial Japanese Army and took to the beaches. Immediately upon jumping in, the tools I felt at your disposal were more than adequate for the purposes of waging war. Whichever faction you choose will generally start with an infantry company, a tank or other armored vehicle, and usually some sort of specialized infantry regiment, which generally changes from faction to faction. Your standard bolt-action rifles are very powerful and very satisfying to fire. 85% of your hits will result in an immediate kill, failing only to kill if you hit an armor leg, someone behind cover, or someone over a long distance, as fall-off damage is a thing. Some machine guns also generally need only 2 or 3 hits to down someone, and heavy machine guns will generally take someone down in 1 or 2 hits. Upon being hit, usually you die immediately, but occasionally you may enter a down state, where you have a period of time to patch yourself up and become mobile again, unless you're hit once more, at which point you will die permanently. Once you die, you shift your position to one of your AI squad mates, should they still be alive. One thing I do really like about this system is that it makes you still feel like you have a fighting chance if you're downed by an enemy, but at the same time, all the weapons still feel appropriately lethal, and soldiers don't feel like bullet sponges. The vehicles and aircraft really pack a punch. Generally speaking, whatever basic vehicle you start off with in any faction will be able to shred infantry with ease. Other vehicles, on the other hand, may be a different story. The main point here is that I felt that I could hold my own even in my first match without having spent any money and only limited time in the game, which is overall a point in favor of it, I would say. However, where things become more grindy is the real sticking point, in my opinion. I continue to enjoy my first few games, unlocking new squads and weapons at an enjoyable pace, and upgrading my squad's arsenal, when I had decided I had my fill of the Pacific Theater and wanted to see if I could get a chance to play as the Americans on D-Day. To my dismay, absolutely no experience had crossed over. And to be honest, I wasn't expecting a complete transfer of XP or anything, given that it's free to play, but maybe something like partial experience at least for the same squads that you've already played as, maybe quarter experience or what have you. But having the tedious experience to level up 12 separate machine gunner squads does not sound very appealing to me. Wait a minute, 12 you say? I thought you said there was only 6 campaigns. Yes, I did say that. You have a good ear, mysterious person I just made up for the purposes of this segue. Because as soon as I was done realizing that none of my squad experience transferred over, I quickly went to the Americans on my Pacific campaign and realized that not even within the same campaign did any experience transfer over. On top of this, when you consider that while your initial arsenal may get the job done, the real toys you might want to play with do take a little bit of grinding to unlock. So on the one hand, Gaijin Studios has done a great job in creating a varied World War II shooter experience, branching across many different theaters and countries. However, as soon as you start playing the game, you realize it quickly incentivizes you to quote-unquote main a country, and play that singular campaign, not just that singular campaign, but that singular country within that campaign over and over and over and over again to get the stuff you really want. Or else you're going to be stuck playing different maps, but with the same bolt action equipment time and time again. So your curse is you play different maps with the same equipment, or you play the same maps over and over again, but with different equipment that you unlock. So, given these two options, I chose the former and began the process of maining Japan. On a side note, is it just me, or is the Japanese in this game terrible? Can someone who is more fluent in the language enlighten me? It just has this very, I typed the phrase into Google Translate and went with whatever I came up type of feeling. Which can work for some languages, but not so much for Japanese. Anyway, I digress. So, over the next couple days, I ground out first 10 levels or so of the Japanese campaign tree, and overall, definitely found myself having a good time. And the unlock system is fairly generous and continues to give you new unlocks at an enjoyable pace for the first 10 levels or so. After which, I definitely found that unlocking new and interesting equipment was much more of a grind once you reach that double-digit threshold. So at that point, I would say that its free-to-play luster starts to significantly diminish. So it was at this point that I decided that I would make the choice if the game was no longer going to become free-to-play. And I ended up dropping about $20 Canadian on the game and picked up a month of premium account time and the battle pass, as I figured that would give me the most amount of coverage. And let me tell you guys, one of those things was definitely a much better value than the other, as even after I got the premium account, the grind barely alleviated at all. While the battle pass, on the other hand, was one of the best battle passes I've seen in quite some time, and even the free version of it is quite generous. After only a bit of grinding, I had about half the premium currency I needed to get the next one. So, if you're going to dump some money into the game, that would be my recommendation. The battle pass, that is. Because then at least you have the opportunity to gain enough currency to buy the next version. All in all, though, I really do think you can get plenty of enjoyment out of Enlisted without having to spend any money at all. But if you're not prepared to spend the money, be forewarned that you're definitely going to run into a hard wall once you reach around level 10. And quite honestly, the game still feels very grindy, even with the premium account. And if your free-to-play game still feels grindy after spending some money, it's probably not the best system for your game. Anyway, I just wanted to spend the first part of the video here talking about the implementation of free-to-play, because for me, it was my biggest concern going into the game. And I think for a lot of other people, it was too. Or it is too. But now with that massive elephant out of the room, let's spend some time talking about the actual gameplay itself. And to be honest, it's pretty good. I was always excited to try a new gun every time you unlock one in the game, and the weapons all have a very solid feel. All of them, besides maybe the pistols, feel very weighty and lethal. In addition to that, they have managed to make the weapons feel different and unique enough to the point where, again, you're always excited to try a new one. However, my biggest concerns with the gameplay come in the form of its gunplay, and its hitboxes in particular. For me, there were a lot of times the hitbox felt very loose, and there were times where I felt like I had dead-on aim at an enemy, yet somehow the bullet seemed to miss him. It's not enough to destroy the gameplay entirely. However, there were certainly points where I felt frustrated that I definitely should have been hitting shots that I was missing. When you compare this to another particular World War II shooter, which gets a lot of comparison to Enlisted, Hell Let Loose, the gunplay and hitboxes feel massively better in that game. That being said, after some adjustment, my initial frustrations lessened, but they never went away completely. Outside of that loosey-goosey gunplay though, Enlisted does have a lot of fun opportunities to offer. Enlisted borrows a lot of the best elements of recent World War II shooters. For example, one of my favorite things about Enlisted is the Engineer class, which not only has the ability to build mobile spawn points, but also build sandbags, ammo boxes, AT guns, and heavy machine gun emplacements, and they even have a shovel which you can actually use to dig down into the ground and build yourself a little foxhole, should you choose. The radio operator can call down artillery strikes at will and eventually upgrade to massive aerial bombardments. The motorman has access to a unique motor weapon which can easily lob shells over enemy emplacements, and I've found to be particularly useful when attacking. The flamethrower toasts squads with ease, and the infantry gameplay has a ton of variety. And one of my favorite things about Enlisted is how the squads are set up to maybe emphasize certain classes, but usually every squad has room for at least one member of every class. So while you may spawn with an anti-tank squad, it will still probably have an engineer within it that will give you access to the aforementioned options. This makes every squad still feel flexible while being tailored to a specific role. Of course, there are vehicles in the game as well, and honestly, I don't have much to say about the vehicle combat. It's pretty serviceable and does a nice job of not feeling overly oppressive while still feeling fearsome. Planes, on the other hand, definitely have the potential to break games if you have a pilot who knows what they're doing. I embrace the Japanese spirit and do not know what I am doing. While the emphasis of the game certainly remains on infantry combat, the vehicles and aircraft add a nice variety with, again, not feeling like they oppress or dominate the battlefield. When it comes to the bots themselves, this is another place I feel like people have had a lot of reservations. I, on the other hand, have always dreamed about a game with this concept. The idea of multiple human players controlling a squad of AI bots in a first-person game. And Enlisted does a pretty good job of realizing that dream. One thing you guys have to remember when envisioning these bots is that these are not like your Counter-Strike bots or something like that, where they just kind of aimlessly mill about the map with a vague sense of direction. The bots here will follow their player around and at least have an actual purpose to their movements. However, that doesn't mean they're smart, because oh boy, there's been plenty to say about the brain-dead nature of these bots, and yeah, they're pretty brain-dead. For example, when asked to defend a point, bots will just kind of ball up in a small area rather than spread out intelligently and take cover with what's around them. Additionally, bots can be very slow off the draw to return fire or shoot at an enemy if they see it, sometimes taking an absolutely painful amount of time to return fire to an enemy. Unfortunately, your bots really feel more like a resource rather than actual human squad members. However, it's a resource that most games don't have, so their addition in and of itself is unique and interesting. Plus, their addition has the added benefit of making battles feel much more epic and grandiose than they might necessarily be. Matches usually contain between 10 to 15 human players on either side. However, each of those players can have a squad with up to 9 soldiers in it. On the defense, I would find myself stashing my bots away in some sort of defensible position where they would be out of range of most enemies, but still able to pick off any stragglers that got through the front lines. Then I would go off myself and try and get as many kills as I could until I would die and spawn as another member of the squad and continue the process until everyone was dead, and then I spawned in a new one. On the attack, however, the bot system really shined in my opinion. Take a game like Hell Let Loose, gets compared to Enlisted a lot. One of my biggest concerns with that game is when you decide that you and your boys are going to attack somewhere and you get ready, and you get all psyched up, and you start the process of crossing the field when whoop, snipped, and you die, and you hopelessly watch your squad carry on the attack without you. In Enlisted, you and your robot squad all attack at the same time, so there's less of a chance of you being hit during that moment you have to cross open terrain and attack an enemy position, as you are camouflaged in a horde of up to 8 AI soldiers. If you do get snipped on your way over, you just move on to the next AI squad mate and continue the assault. This helps enlisted matches feel very well paced in my opinion. I always feel like there's plenty of action to be had, and even if I have a total squad wipe, it's never too long before you can get another squad back in the action. In my opinion, this pacing is probably Enlisted's greatest strength. Matches are a reasonable time length, generally half an hour to complete, and then you're able to jump in pretty quickly once a match starts. This means you have pretty limited downtime, and as a result, it makes it very easy to keep going. On a side note, I also want to praise a couple more points that I really appreciate Enlisted on, which is that I've found this game to be devoid of some of the features which ruin the fun for me in some other more modern World War II shooters, which is sniper and grenade spam. Grenade spam is fixed due to the fact that generally speaking, only a handful of soldiers in your squads will actually have grenades, unless you're willing to splurge to equip everyone with them, but grenades are usually not powerful enough, and you only can carry around one at a time, so that it doesn't become a larger issue. When it comes to snipers, snipers are better balanced in most war shooters I find, due to the bot system, because if you do get sniped, you'll have a moment to react while the sniper is loading the bolt in their next shot for your next squad mate to jump into cover when you spawn in and take over as them. Or if you happen to have a large enough squad, you could just simply rush the sniper position, and there's no way he'll be able to kill all your soldiers before you get there, because the bolt-action rifle simply can't fire that fast. Ultimately, though, where do I fall on Enlisted? Well, if it were to have a motto, it would be the same as fast food, consistently mediocre. And while that might sound fairly insulting, I actually mean that as a lot higher praise than it sounds. While a lot of people complain about fast food, tons of people still eat it. You might say Wendy's, for example, makes a solid burger. Is it the best burger you've ever tasted? Nah, definitely not. But when you have that burger itch, more often than not, you'll find yourself reaching for that Wendy's burger rather than the fancier restaurant, because you know it's going to be a consistent experience. That's what Enlisted is like for me. While it may not be the best war game I've ever played, I oftentimes find myself reaching for it when I have that World War II shooter itch, because I can guarantee myself at least a mediocre experience. I probably won't come away feeling super frustrated. At worst, I'll feel something like, well, that was an experience. And at best, I'll have that craving satisfied. When compared to a game like Hell Let Loose, I find that while that game has higher highs, it also has lower lows. When everything is clicking on all cylinders, that game is amazing. However, I can count the number of times I've had that feeling while playing the game on two hands. Oftentimes, I find myself cursing the heavens after taking 5 minutes to walk to an objective, prepare, and execute an attack, only to be picked off within seconds. The game often feels like a Chase the Dragon experience, where I'm trying to chase those amazing highs I had while playing the game in the past, only to find myself coming up continually disappointed. That's not to say that Hell Let Loose is a bad game. That's not what I'm saying at all. My issue with it is that its core gameplay loop rarely ends up highlighting the game's best features. But this is not the case with Enlisted, as its best features are regularly highlighted, while on the opposite end, its worst features are buried underneath the surface, waiting to surprise you. So should you try Enlisted? Well, if you've been looking for a World War II shooter to fill that itch, I'd recommend you give it a go. You might just find it more satisfying than you think. And while it does do a decent job in eliminating some of my issues when it comes to games that share its free-to-play label, it does not eliminate all of them, and the grind, particularly with Enlisted, can be a real bitch, even if you pony up the dough. So, if you end up liking the game, be prepared to end up paying with both some time and money. Anyway, this brings us to the end of our video on Enlisted. I hope you found it informative to see if Enlisted is a game you would like to try. And this has actually been a pretty fun experience for me because I've always wanted to do a review on a product that is featured or sponsored on a lot of YouTube channels to kind of see is it good or is it not. So this was, like I said, pretty enjoyable little experiment for me. And, when it comes to Enlisted, it's kind of become one of those games that when I only have maybe a half an hour to play before I have to go and take care of something else, I end up playing it. So I guess that says something in the end. In any case, comrades, that's it for me. And until next time, you guys take care.
Did you think